Meet Khenu. It's 1350 BCE. It's 43 degrees Celsius outside, and Khenu is thriving. Not surviving, not enduring, thriving. Because Khenu lives in a mud brick house on the west bank of Thebes, in the middle of the greatest civilization on Earth, and everything around him has been quietly engineered over 3,000 years to make his afternoon comfortable. The walls of his house are thick enough that the sun outside is a rumor. A vent on the roof, called a malqaf, pulls cool north wind down into his living room. A porous clay jar sits under it, sweating water that evaporates and drops the incoming air another 5 degrees. His linen tunic breathes. His shaved head sits under a wig that lifts off the scalp. His breakfast is a jar of thick, low-alcohol beer, safer than the Nile water it came from, and rich in the B vitamins that keep his brain running in the heat. A wormhole opens in the roof. The wind catcher gets sucked into it. Then Khenu. Smash cut. Khenu lands face first in a snowdrift. Ice Age, 30,000 BCE. A woolly mammoth ambles past and glances at him with mild curiosity, then keeps walking, because a strange, soft man in a snowdrift is not the strangest thing this mammoth has seen this week. Today's question: could an ancient Egyptian, the pampered aristocrat of the ancient world, survive 1 week in the Stone Age? And what would he learn about his own civilization if he did? Let's find out. This is Sand and Sinew. Khenu has just gone from the hottest place humans ever lived to the coldest. A 60-degree temperature swing in about 4 seconds. His linen kilt, world-class engineering for the Sahara, is now a fashion crime that is actively trying to kill him. Every property that made linen good in the desert, its lightness, its breathability, its refusal to hold heat, is now working against him. Because in the Ice Age, you don't want to lose heat. You want to hoard it like it's the last thing you own. Which, at the moment, it is. In Egypt, fire was somebody else's job. The kitchen slave's job, the bakery's job, the temple priest's job. Khenu has never lit a fire in his life. He has watched fires. He has warmed his hands over fires. But the actual mechanism of turning cold sticks into hot sticks is completely opaque to him. He is holding a rolled papyrus scroll and a wet twig, and hoping the universe will meet him halfway. Enter Grunk, Ice Age hunter. Broad shoulders, mammoth-fur cloak, a single tooth that has somehow outlasted the others. He is dragging a mammoth femur behind him because he needs a new tent pole, and he stops to watch Khenu clap 2 soaked papyrus scrolls together. Grunk has seen many strange things in his life. He has never seen this. Not witchcraft. Iron pyrite plus flint. 2 rocks. You strike them together, and one of them sheds tiny fragments of hot iron that are, briefly, hot enough to ignite dry moss. That's it. That's the whole technology. Humans have been doing this for at least 30,000 years, long enough that by Khenu's time, fire-making was already ancient history to Egyptians. It had been invented, refined, and passed down across so many generations that Khenu's civilization had literally forgotten how it worked. They had specialists for it. They had temples for it. They had a whole priesthood built around keeping sacred fires burning, precisely because they had lost the folk knowledge of how to start one from scratch. Khenu, sitting in his mud brick palace with servants and beer, has forgotten the single most important technology his species ever invented. And now, freezing in the snow, he is watching a man who never forgot. Fire buys Khenu the night. But an Ice Age doesn't care about one night. He needs shelter. Every Egyptian building technology depends on one thing: the annual Nile flood, which deposits a fresh layer of silt on the floodplain every summer. You mix that silt with chopped straw, pack it into wooden molds, and bake it in the sun. Mud brick. Cheap, abundant, and thermally magical, because a thick mud wall doesn't insulate, it delays. The heat of noon arrives inside your house at midnight, when the desert has gone cold and you actually want it. But there is no Nile in the Ice Age. There won't be one for another 28,000 years. The rivers are locked under ice sheets. The floodplains are tundra. There is no silt, no straw, no sunbaking. Khenu's entire civilization is architecturally impossible here. Grunk, meanwhile, lives in a pit house. He has dug down about a meter into the frozen ground, framed the roof with curved mammoth ribs because trees are rare on the tundra, and mammoth bones, tragically, are not, and covered it all with hides and turf. It looks like a giant fur-covered dome half buried in the earth. Khenu ducks inside expecting misery and finds it warm. The earth around Grunk is a thermal battery. Underground, the temperature holds steady around 4 degrees Celsius no matter what the surface is doing. Blizzard outside? 4 degrees. Clear night at -30? 4 degrees. In an ice age, 4 degrees is a heat wave. And here is the thing Khenu can't see, because he is too busy being uncomfortable. It is the exact same principle as his own mud brick walls back home. Thermal mass, using the earth to buffer temperature swings. His civilization does it with baked silt. Grunk's does it with a hole in the ground. Different climate, different materials, exact same engineering. Two humans, 30,000 years apart, solving the same physics problem the same way. Khenu is used to bread and beer. Bread from grain. Beer from grain. In case that is not clear, grain, and then additionally, grain. His entire caloric intake for his entire life has come from grain. No beer, Khenu. Wheat won't be domesticated for another 20,000 years. Grunk hands him a strip of dark red, leathery, dried meat. It smells like a hoof. Pemmican-style dried meat. High fat, high protein, portable, and critically, safe. You can carry it for months. It doesn't need refrigeration because you've already taken the water out. Bacteria need water to grow, so remove the water, remove the bacteria. This is the freeze-drying industry, 30,000 years before the freeze-drying industry was patented. And here is where the two of them are secretly running the same playbook. Khenu's civilization runs on beer, a technology for making a fluid safe by killing pathogens with fermentation. Grunk's civilization runs on jerky, a technology for making a solid safe by killing pathogens with dehydration. Different climates, same problem, same answer. Food preservation. Because both of them figured out, without any of the biology, that most of the things that can kill you in food are things you can starve or drown. We know, Khenu. And here is the uncomfortable math. One successful mammoth hunt could feed Grunk's whole band for months. Egyptian agriculture, at its peak, couldn't match that yield per hour of effort for another 20,000 years. Khenu is standing next to a man whose economy, measured in calories per unit of work, is more efficient than his own. Grunk grunts. Later that afternoon, Grunk takes Khenu out to check the traps. Not to hunt. Khenu couldn't hunt if his life depended on it, which increasingly it does, but to see how the trap line works. Deadfalls, pit and cover snares. A rope of twisted sinew rigged to a bent sapling. Grunk built all of this with his hands, from materials he gathered on foot, in a climate that would kill Khenu in an afternoon. And every trap is set on the assumption that the animal is smart. Because it is. Grunk's engineering is not just against physics, it is against another mind. In Thebes, linen was engineered perfection. Breathable, wicking, cool. In a snowstorm, it is paper. Every property that made it good in the desert is now trying to murder him. Grunk drops a mammoth-fur pelt on him. That's because it is the mammoth personally. Hide, sinew, and fur. An insulation stack that traps warm air near the skin and blocks wind. It is the same three-layer logic your ski jacket uses today. Wicking base, insulating middle, windproof shell. Ice Age hunters figured that out with a scraper and a bone needle. The bone needle, a sewing needle carved from mammoth ivory or bird bone, is roughly 40,000 years old. Older than agriculture.
Older than pottery. Older than most languages. People were sewing tailored, fitted, layered clothing before they were farming, before they were making pots, before they were writing anything down. Which means Khenu, who thinks he is the peak of civilization, is now wearing something technically more sophisticated than anything he owns back home. His linen tunic is a rectangle. Grunk's coat is engineered. Khenu, now warm, decides he wants a drink. He scoops up a handful of snow and eats it. He immediately gets colder. Eating snow costs your body heat to melt it. Your body has to spend calories and heat converting ice to water inside your mouth. You can freeze yourself faster by hydrating wrong than by not hydrating at all. Grunk melts his snow first. Over the fire. In a leather bag full of hot stones dropped in one by one. Stone boiling predates pottery by tens of thousands of years. You can't put a leather bag directly on the fire, it burns, so you heat the stones in the fire and bring the fire to the water instead of the other way around. Same physics as an electric kettle, different century by, all of them. Night. The wind outside is doing something that sounds personal. Grunk lights a fat lamp made of a mammoth vertebra, wick of moss and animal fat, and disappears deeper into the cave that his pit house opens onto. Khenu follows because staying near the entrance means staying near the wind. Grunk has spent the winter painting the walls. Ochre handprints, a running bison, a herd of aurochs frozen mid-leap across the ceiling. Cave paintings. The oldest known paintings on Earth are at least 45,000 years old, in Sulawesi, in Chauvet, in El Castillo. Older than farming, older than cities, older than every language we still speak. They are, as far as we can tell, the first time our species used a surface to say, "This happened. I was here. This is what I saw." They are the beginning of the archive. Every museum, every book, every YouTube video, every history channel starts on this wall, with this man and a jar of red mud. Khenu, watching in the firelight, does something small and enormous. He picks up a stick, dips it in the ochre, and adds a crude stick figure of himself. He puts a beer jar next to it. He adds a heart, and he carves, in the corner, "Khenu was here," in hieroglyphs. Grunk stares at the wall. Grunk does not react. Grunk is used to worse. Khenu, in his own century, will carve into stone temples and write on papyrus scrolls that will outlast his empire. But hieroglyphs are just cave paintings with a rulebook. The impulse, mark the wall, tell the future you existed, is the same one Grunk is scratching out by firelight 30,000 years earlier. Everything Khenu's civilization is proud of, the writing, the record-keeping, the pyramid inscriptions, the elaborate obsession with being remembered, starts here. On this wall, with this old man, and a jar of red mud. Khenu didn't visit the past. He visited the workshop. Morning,
Khenu wakes up under a mammoth-fur.
warm for the first time in a week. Grunk is packing the fire down. The wormhole is starting to hum in the corner of the cave. Khenu could stay. For about half a second he considers it, and then he looks around at the pit house and the trap line and the wall of paintings, and realizes something that Egypt has spent 3,000 years hiding from itself. Here is the thing nobody puts on the museum plaque. Ancient Egypt looks like the beginning of civilization because we start counting when the writing starts. Because writing is what leaves a paper trail. But every single load-bearing technology under that civilization, fire, shelter, clothing, food preservation, water treatment, symbolic art, was invented, tested, and refined for tens of thousands of years by people whose names we will never know, whose faces we will never see, and whose only signature is a handprint on a wall. The pyramids didn't invent themselves. They stand on top of a stack of prior technologies, each of which was itself standing on a deeper stack, all the way down to a man in a cave making sparks with 2 rocks. When we talk about the achievements of ancient civilizations, we are really talking about the last visible layer of a much older achievement. The achievement of staying alive, of keeping the workshop running, of passing the knowledge on. Grunk is the workshop. Khenu is the showroom. And the showroom always forgets what it owes the workshop. There is a moment before Khenu leaves when Grunk hands him 3 things: a chunk of flint, a strip of jerky, and a small ochre handprint dried onto a flake of stone. Souvenirs from the workshop. Take these back, Grunk seems to be saying without saying it, and remember where they came from. Because the moment you forget, you start believing your civilization invented them. And that is a kind of poverty no amount of gold can fix. Khenu takes the 3 gifts. He looks at Grunk. He looks at the wall. He looks at his own soft hands, holding the tools of a species that survived because someone, 30,000 years ago, refused to stop paying attention. And for the first time in his life, an ancient Egyptian understands what ancient actually means. It does not mean old. It means unbroken. It means every handprint on that wall is still touching him. Every fire ever lit is still warming his blood. Every strip of jerky ever dried is still feeding him. The workshop never closed. It just changed addresses. And that, more than any pyramid, is what makes Egypt worth remembering. Not that they built things, that they inherited things and honored them and passed them on. That they wrote it down, that in every wall of every temple, if you squint, you can still see a handprint underneath. Khenu gets sucked back into the wormhole. Grunk grunts once, and on the cave wall, next to the bison and the aurochs and the handprints, he adds one final small figure. A stick figure man, holding a beer jar. Signed in ochre, Khenu was here. Next week, Khenu meets a Roman engineer and immediately loses an argument about concrete. Subscribe if you want to see it. Leave a handprint in the comments. And if you enjoyed this one, share it with someone who still thinks history started with the pyramids. Because it didn't. It started with a stick, a wall, and a jar of red mud.